Hello, everyone, and welcome to People of Interest. I'm your host, Miguel Guanipa. People of Interest is based on the premise that everyone has a story, so we invite people to our show to share their story. My mind went blank all of a sudden. That happens a lot of times. We invite people of all walks of life to tell their story so that we may be encouraged, entertained, and perhaps inspired. My guest today is a good friend. He's a pastor of a church called The River in Douglas, correct?
You got it.
And he's a very good friend and a very smart guy, too. And his name is Bruce Dykstra.
Well, thank you.
Bruce, thank you very much for coming to the
Yeah.
show. Thanks for joining me.
Appreciate it.
Yeah.
Love the invitation.
We were talking about the background that you have. You said Cabot Road in Nova Scotia, right?
You got it. So Cabot Trail
Yeah.
in Nova Scotia on Cape Breton Island
Cape Breton Island,
Yep.
Canada,
in Canada.
In
Nova
Canada.
Scotia to be exact,
Nova Scotia.
where I grew up.
That looks really beautiful down there. Do you have
Yeah.
something that an experience when you went there one time? You want to talk about?
Well, the reason that we chose it and when I suggested it is because 2 years ago, on a family vacation, we went back to Nova Scotia. One, to visit my family, and the other is to take my kids, who've never really experienced Nova Scotia. And so we wanted to show them Nova Scotia, where my wife and I lived for 3 years.
Mhm.
And so we rented an RV, and the whole family piled in. And one of the highlights to that was to actually take that RV and then drive around on the Cabot Trail. And the Cabot Trail is roughly about 200 miles of road that goes along the coastline. And at times you're right by the water, and other times you're, say, 1,000 feet in the air. So it's
Really?
actually a
So some beautiful vistas,
beautiful, beautiful. So
beautiful
and
panorama.
yeah, just to go in there. Mary and I had done that with her parents before, and so we're stopping and telling all kinds of stories of when we were kids, or so when we were first married, and all the kids are like, "Oh, wow, this is a really good story," kind of thing. But then they experienced some of it, and there was one particular place where we get off the road and we started hiking, and in Canada, in their national parks, they put these red chairs just out in the middle of their national park. And then you're supposed to find these red chairs
Hmm.
and then take a picture on, what do they call it, that Instagram stuff?
Like a little built-in scavenger hunt kind of
You
deal?
got it.
Oh,
You got it. And we found one. And so it was just this highlight, just taking pictures of it.
Yeah.
And here we had found one. We were celebrating as a family. And so it was beautiful. And the kids talk about it all the time. Remember this, remember that. And I think that was something that really kind of made the trip worthwhile because it constantly comes up in conversations with our
What
kids.
was the origin of the red chair? Do you know? Why did they put a red chair or red chairs around for people to look for?
Well, one, to encourage people to visit the
Okay.
parks. And Canada's color is red. So I think they just
Oh.
kind of tied it into all together.
So it's not like kind of a Rip Van Winkle story behind it or something like that. It's just a
No,
red
we
chair.
could make one up though. You and I
Yeah,
could just spend
could-
some time
we
kind
could
of
make
twisting
something
a
around
tail
that.
here. So that might be your next book.
So, did you meet your wife? Your wife, Mary Dykstra,
Yes.
right?
Yeah.
You met her in Newfoundland?
No, not
I
Newfoundland.
mean, Nova Scotia. I'm sorry.
Actually, I met Mary when I went to school.
Hmm.
So I graduated from school in Nova Scotia in '84, which is ancient nowadays. So in 1984, I graduated. But then for college, I went to Calvin College in Grand Rapids, Michigan.
Hmm.
And that's where I met Mary.
Oh.
And then 3 years later, after her junior year, we got married. She did her senior year. And then after her senior year, I went back to Nova Scotia, or we went back to Nova Scotia.
Hmm.
And that's when I started my schooling for architecture.
Calvin, a theologian.
Calvin, a theologian.
Calvin. First name
Johnny.
was what? John
Johnny.
Calvin.
Yep.
But somebody told me today, actually, which I didn't know, that John Calvin was French.
Yes. Spent a lot of time in Geneva.
Huh.
So,
I
which is-
didn't know that he was French. This time I'm thinking he's one of the Puritans, Americans, whatever.
Yeah.
And that's something.
Yeah.
Huh. That's good. You know what I was thinking about?
It was in the
actually?
1500s, and so the Puritans wasn't until about the 1800s.
Well, you know, I mean,
1700s.
come on. I didn't go to school for that.
Okay, that's totally true.
But you did.
That I did. That I did.
You did go to school. You went and you went to Calvin, and then you got ordained to the ministry. No.
Well, the part of the story was so I was on full track to be an architect. So my heart's desire coming out of high school is I wanted to be an architect, design
Huh.
buildings.
Yeah.
And so I went to Calvin for just 2 years while my wife went there for 4 years. So I got what was called just a pre-architectural degree.
Mm-hmm.
Built my portfolio, presented it, and then I went to architectural school after that.
Mm-hmm.
And so I went to the Technical University of Nova Scotia, which is in Halifax, Nova Scotia.
Mm.
So that's where I graduated with my architectural degree.
So you have an architectural degree.
Yeah, I sure do.
That's great.
Well, you said I was smart, so.
Yeah. Well, I was thinking of other things, but I had to throw something in there.
Oh, you probably could. Yeah, who knows what this
So,
edited
so
would be.
right now you are helping an architect.
Yeah, so right
Right.
now I'm kind of doing two jobs.
Two
One,
jobs.
I'm a pastor at the River Community Church in Douglas.
Mm-hmm.
And then also, 3 days a week, I work at a very fine architectural firm in Worcester,
Mm.
Dixon Salo Architects. And so I work for them 3 days a week. And for me, it's an opportunity to kind of get out of the church scene and kind of wrap my head around some other things,
Mhm.
which is very helpful for me. And so that's what I'm doing.
Well, you've been pastoring the river. You said for about, it's going to be 14 years now.
14.
Okay.
Yeah.
So now you're like thinking, okay, I can still do this, but I like to do something a little different also on the side, get a different
Yeah.
view, whatever.
Yeah, people may think it's like, your mid-age crisis. So
Middle-aged
I
guys,
turned,
I thought you were
yeah.
only like 30. Aren't
Well, I turned 33. Well, actually, I turned just over 50. And
Ooh.
so, yeah, just looking to kind of explore and to kind of see other things happen. And, yeah, so that's why I kind of went back to the roots.
Do you believe that? Do you believe the middle-aged crisis situation? Does that happen, you think, for real, or is that made up?
Well, I think there's probably a lot of conjecture about it. There's probably a lot of made-up stuff.
Yeah.
For me, I have been a pastor for 24 years. And for me, the challenge, I'm looking for that next challenge. And if that's a crisis, yeah, that is something that I'm yearning for, to be challenged in different ways.
What about doing architectural drawings for churches?
Yeah, I could do that. I don't know if that's a spiritual significance. Yeah, one is very technical and the other is very philosophical. So I don't know if there's that kind of that spiritual connection for me. For me, it's about the challenge for me is I yearn to see people move forward.
Mm-hmm.
That's where my heart is. That's where I love being involved. I love seeing people's lives move forward in a grand way, in little ways.
Well, let's
just wanna
define
help
that.
people
Let's
better.
define that a little bit. Then that's very interesting. So let's talk a little bit about that. Moving forward.
Mm-hmm.
Talk to me a little bit about that. What does that mean? If it means a lot of things, tell me a couple of things that it means, or that you've experienced seeing in
Yeah,
yourself
so-
or in other people.
Yeah. I think what I've noticed and what I've experienced is that there are many, many seasons of people's lives.
Mm-hmm.
Whether it's, you're young, you're a child, maybe you're a teenager, you're moving on to college, but there's these transition seasons. And in those transitions and moving from one season to the other, you need to be prepared to be making that change. And to make sure that that transition is a positive one that you're moving forward, that you're growing, becoming better, whether you're becoming a better, say, athlete, or becoming a better mathematician or writer, or my daughter is training to be a civil engineer. Well, she's got to understand math better and better.
Mm-hmm.
And I like to see those transitions. I like to see people really excel, apply themselves, and to move forward. I don't think people ought to be, and again, this is my opinion, I don't think we should be settling for where we're at. I think we should always be enjoying the present, but also yearning for what can be possible next. And I think that's what I like to be involved in.
You like to be a part of that in people's lives and your own life, I gather
Yes.
also.
Yeah. Yeah. So one of the things that I do just on the side, just for ministry, is I do strength finding assessments. And in
Strength
that,
finding assessment.
people will do an assessment and they'll find out through that assessment what they're strong at.
Mm-hmm.
And then to walk along somebody who's just discovered what they're strong at, and to coach them and to walk with them and how to apply that to the tasks that they're involved with, whether it's being a father, whether it's being an employee or an employer, whatever aspect,
Mm-hmm.
how they can do that better and move forward. That's what I like to be around. I like to see people do
But
that.
there's so many roles in life. How do you keep that packed up there in that big noodle?
Ah,
Or is that you don't, or you just not do that? You just figure this is one subject here. I can work here in this particular moment with this particular entity, person, group, and move in this particular direction. Or
Yeah.
that wouldn't it crowd your mind if you were thinking about? Because again, there's so many different people.
definitely. Yeah. Yeah, so you're limited. And then I don't do it with a lot of people.
Mm-hmm.
But I do it probably 4 or 5 people in a year, and that's enough focus for me.
What was the last one that you did? That you, I mean, there's no names or anything. It's just
Yeah.
tell me people and what they accomplished, where they move forward. How do you observe that progress and
Yeah. So one person that I had worked with, which was a lot of fun, he'd completed a particular program through college, and at the end of it, worked for 6 months in that field and found that he didn't like it.
Mm-hmm.
And was at a crisis. He's like, okay, here I am. I identify myself with this particular profession. I've trained for it for the last 4 years. I'm now working in it for 6,
Mm-hmm.
but it just doesn't. It doesn't work. It
6
doesn't.
months.
6 months.
Yeah.
And it just doesn't. My heart isn't there, and it's just not good. So how do I make that transition?
Mm-hmm.
And so he and I sat down, he did the assessment, he found out just what he was strong in. And when you go through the assessment, you get 5 strengths. And then we began to kind of shape those strengths as he lived in them and how he found that they were true about himself. And then began to kind of ask the question, okay, where does this really excel? Where do these strengths, as you live them, where would it excel?
Mm-hmm.
And we got together for about a 3-month period just asking those same questions. What would it look like if I was here? What was there? Okay, if this is the road, what are the steps I need to take to kind of work down that?
Mm-hmm.
And at the end of it, there was a particular heartbeat in his strength and in who he was as a personality. He identified a particular field, and it was nursing, that really saw himself really excelling. Even before he went through all the training, he could see himself living in it.
Huh.
Then he started interviewing. And this is all part of the coaching. So he interviewed 4 nurses. He said, okay, well, what does this here happen? How does this here? What do you do here? What does this here? And then he started trailing people. And by the end of it, he was prepared to say, you know what? I can go down this field confident, knowing that this will be a job that I can get into. This is a job that will really satisfy that my desires will be.
Mm-hmm.
But it took those 3 months of just hovering around his strengths, asking the questions that were tough, and then to be, coached through it and what to do, what are the next steps. And that was a lot of fun. And to see at the end, he's now a nurse. Does incredibly well.
He's enjoying it.
He's enjoying it. There's a passion that he has about it. And it just resonates with his heart. And so to be part of that was something that was very significant for me. And that's what I love doing. And so I see that in ministry. I'm not quite sure in architecture yet. We'll see.
So you've identified that in yourself then.
Yes. Yes, I would say that that's something. I love seeing it in myself.
Yeah.
And I love seeing it in other people. I love walking with people and seeing them grow, especially find their own little, if you will, niche in their life and in this world. And so I enjoy that immensely.
So what would you call yourself then if there was to be, if you were to open up a practice where you would engage people in that capacity and then and move them, that was your job, to move them in that direction, to find their strengths and so forth. What would that be called?
Well, I know that there is an industry or a field out there called life coach.
Life coach.
And when I talk to other life coaches and I look to investigate that, they tend to be kind of really a focused life coach. For me, I like the big picture. And so I suppose it could be kind of a life coach.
Like a big picture life coach.
Big picture life coach.
BPLC. You are BPLC.
I'm a BPLC. All right. I'm going to have to patent that baby and kind of own
Whoa.
it. So that
We've had enough patent pending.
Yeah. Good.
You know, when you were saying that, actually made me think about something that I have been thinking about actually for some time. And it's, I do hear that message on occasion of the message of find your strengths and hone in on them, and then find a focus, join those together, and pursue a goal or calling. And I find sometimes those messages can be a little discouraging. You know, because you get, like, you see where I'm moving towards when I say that?
Expand a little bit more, kind of hone it in for me.
It's when you hear something like that, you always ask yourself, oh, wait a minute, am I not doing what I'm supposed to be doing, or have I not reached my goals? And so they can be, it can go in the opposite direction.
Sure.
Where you can be like, you can be thinking, oh, I haven't found my strengths, and all of a sudden, suddenly you're dissatisfied with your life.
Yeah.
And so you wonder, I wonder about that. I understand what you're saying, and I understand the message, but often I feel like that is such, almost like almost like a cliche sometimes.
Sure.
When I hear it in some communications that I have, and I wonder, well, I am almost intrinsically, I do try to do better, whatever I'm doing. It's almost like I think it's probably rare to find, but you probably can find people who say, no, I'm just going to stay here where I am. I don't really want to move there. I don't want to move forward. It'd be hard to find. Most people, I would think intrinsically say, gee, I wish maybe I could do this. They just maybe don't have the means or the ways or the ability to connect the dots, which is where your job comes in. But for if you're in that state, or the state where, I'm kind of happy where I am, and right now I don't feel necessarily, maybe in a few months or maybe in a few years, suddenly there'll be a change in my life, and I'll see, this is where God wanted me, this is what I need to be.
Yeah.
But in the meantime, I don't want to feel dissatisfied because I've been doing other things in my life. Let's say you've been raising a family. You've been ministering in a church. All those things are important things.
Yeah.
So if somebody threw that at you all of a sudden, you might feel, oh, I thought I was doing fairly okay. You get what I'm saying?
Sure. Yeah. I think one of the things that I discover, and I'm kind of in a unique position because I tend to connect with people who are at that place where they're like, I'm sensing that this maybe isn't quite right or where I ought to be, and I want to wonder my way out of it. And so there's already that sense of dissatisfaction before you even do that.
Right, okay.
And so I tend to kind of yoke, especially in terms of the Strength Finders coaching, that's when people come to me. They're like at, I don't want to say wit's end, but they know that there is something going on, whether it's dissatisfaction or whether it's angst or it just doesn't seem to be the right fit, and I need to find my way out of it.
Right.
I tend to be with people right there.
Yeah.
And when you start putting things like their strengths and steps that they need to start taking, then it seems like things start to click. Right? But I think if I'm just happy, and then all of a sudden I come and it's like, what do you mean I got to improve? You shouldn't be saying that, right? Because I'm at a good place. And I can
Yeah.
definitely see people who would be starting to second guess themselves. If you
Yeah.
will. And maybe that's what I'm kind of hearing from what you're
Yeah,
saying.
yeah. It's a little complicated in my head when I think about it, but I think that something like that, a message like that, should actually, I would think, oh, that should be something that should actually prod me to. Maybe it has made me think, but the way that it started making me think is, yeah, now I feel an itch that I didn't have before.
Yep,
You know?
definitely. Yeah. Yeah, and I think sometimes I get into conversations where I cause an itch.
Yeah.
And that can be a little maybe disconcerting for the person who needs to start itching.
You know, they have stuff for that.
Yeah.
Hey, I'm sorry.
Some
go
kind
ahead.
of powder, right?
I couldn't help myself. Go ahead.
Yeah. Well, I would
Yeah,
say,
yeah.
and I think in knowing you and knowing ourselves, I mean, I think there is this, especially when it comes to the spiritual journey, there is a sense of kind of keeping it at arm's length. And for somebody to come along and say, hey, you need to itch that can cause some angst. What do you mean? I mean, maybe there's a little bit of, are you judging me? I'm comfortable where I'm at, or I just don't want to think about that.
Yeah, yeah.
I think often enough in the spiritual journey, that's where I don't want to say lack of willingness to kind of stretch, try to grow. I think there's a lot of comfortable, I'm good where I'm at.
Yeah, yeah.
And
But that's interesting now that you say that, because going back to what I was trying to convey, sometimes when I hear the words about trying to do this or trying to move forward in this direction, it's almost like this is a separate arena, and here's your spiritual life.
okay,
And
yeah.
so this suddenly takes on all the importance. When I'm thinking over here is where you really need to begin and grow.
Okay, yes.
And then this will probably come into it. You know, but this is where it's at. This is where you want to always not be completely dissatisfied, but always be saying there's always more and better.
Yeah.
And there I feel like that's why I hear that other thing. This I don't hear properly when I hear that other side being almost like compared to this, not separated, as if this is actually more important.
Okay.
Because we do live in a world where there's this notion of you have to have success, you have to have this, you have to do that, and we're over here where I find actually foundational.
Yeah.
It's like why there seems to be a lot of focus on this when actually if this is not good, this would mean nothing.
Yeah.
Follow what I'm saying?
Yeah, well, it's interesting because as I read the story of Jesus, I read the story of God, and there is this. God is given to us and described and told to us of His holiness, His almightiness. Jesus even says, I want you to be perfect. And yet, when I look at my life, I'm like, man, I'm not perfect. And so, but there's always this call, there's this yearning, there's this even, kind of push in terms of the spiritual to move closer and closer to that. So there's always this, I need to grow, I need to be better at this, I need to love my wife better, I need to love God better, I need to love my friends better. How do I go about doing that? That's always wrapped up in your relationship with God through Jesus. He's calling you into that deeper, wider impact. And my tendency, and the tendency that I connect with people as well, is there's this, no, I want to keep this part. I don't want it to influence this part, so I'm just going to keep that part over there. Right? And I think that's what you're talking about. There's this one part, maybe it's job, maybe it's a habit, maybe it's what I like to do for fun. But I want to keep it over here, and here's where the spiritual is. And to bring them together can often cause that angst so much that it's like, no, I don't want to bring it over.
Oh, no, that's something else.
Oh, that is.
That's
Okay.
something, a very interesting subject too. But I was speaking within the context of when I hear that message, I hear it as if this is the be all and end all.
Okay.
And so I actually hear it in churches.
Okay.
So I'm wondering why is this, and there are actually programs in churches that are designed to find your purpose, find this, find that, and then you go on, you sit through a seminar or whatever, and you wonder, well, that's pretty good. That's pretty good. But I feel a disconnect somewhere in there, where the focus, the word worldly comes in suddenly in my head. Like that seems to be like that's all good, but it almost seems like it takes preeminence over. Actually, this is what's really important here first. You know, like first things. There are things that are first, and then things that are second. If you're like, let me lecture you for a second. if you're talking to somebody, if I'm talking to someone, and I am, well, let's take you for example. When you talk to a person in that capacity, where you're trying to engage, you yoke yourself with them. You're first a pastor. That's your foundation from where you come from before you engage and offer this advice.
Right.
The advice has to do with, perhaps you have a situation where the job, you're not satisfied with your job, and the person's saying, okay, I think I could be doing something like this person that you were talking about. So you begin as a pastor, and then you move into that. You don't begin with, okay, let's talk about, the statistics in the American, the whatever.
Yeah.
You know what I'm saying? That's what I'm trying to say. So,
Yep.
But it seems to me that sometimes when I hear that message, it doesn't begin as that. It begins as, this is what's important here. How to deal with the world. It says, no, I need to have a foundation here,
Yeah.
before I even think about how to deal with it. That will become a lot more. I will be able to apprehend that better if I have this piece together first.
Okay.
And it's a big conversation, but you follow
Yeah.
kind of
I
what I'm
see where
saying.
you're going with.
That's what I was saying. The other thing that you were talking about is interesting too, but that ties into that. I think I want to take over the show right now. So
Okay. Yeah. It is the
Just kidding.
Miguel.
No,
I'll
that-
host for today.
you
My name is Bruce Dykstra. I'm hosting, and my guest today is Miguel.
that ties into that. That's coming from over here, and then ties into to what I'm talking about. In that, yes, if you have your life in God, and you have things that you kind of separating, but you don't want to bring them in with them, then that's the similar problem.
Yeah.
In that you keep keeping these two things separate when it should all be one.
Okay. Well, it's interesting. So in preparation, you'd given me some really good questions, and one of the questions was, are there significant events that shape you? And in regards to our conversation, so one of the events in my life that was very significant in shaping was, so we have 4 kids, Andrew, Jesse, Adelaide, and Samuel. And our third is Adelaide, and she's our only girl. And so when she was born, it was just a significant moment. So Adelaide came pretty quick. So quick that the doctor wasn't around, and it was just myself and the nurse when Adelaide was born. And as Adelaide's coming out and the nurse is down there taking care of things, the umbilical cord was around Adelaide's neck. And not a good situation. And so the nurse said, Bruce, could you come over here and help me? And so here I am helping her maneuver in it, and I'm taking the umbilical cord of my daughter off so that she wouldn't choke, right? And in that moment, right, there was this strong sense of incredible amount of love for my daughter, for my wife, for my family. And it really became clear to me in that point that one of the ways in which I am dad is that I am protector. And that word was very strong, and that event has been part of Adelaide and my story as we've kind of grown up and kind of loved each other through it. But that sense of, okay, how am I protector? And looking back, I can say there was moments where, man, I messed up in that. There was other moments where it happened, but I needed to think deeply about how I was protector for my family.
Mm-hmm.
And I needed to grow in that. And so I started thinking about, okay, how do I be a dad that protects? And so I started to talk to other men about it. How are you doing this? What are some of the things that you're doing? And that became emblematic of what we're talking about, is that there's this moment where I see this image, I see this event kind of unfolding, and it shapes in me some clarity in my role in my family's life. And so I need to start working and growing and becoming better at protecting.
Mm-hmm.
And so how do I do that? And so it's always that growing. And I've used that story several times when I'm coaching, is there are moments where it just becomes crystal clear that either you're short something, you're just not desiring your purpose, connecting with that. And those moments begin to kind of shape and give you a platform to move forward on. And you begin to learn through those and say, okay, this is an area where I need to grow. So how do I go about doing that? And so, in our conversation, I think that's kind of, for me, just this example of, one, recognizing that, hey, I'm short in this area. It became crystal clear that I need to grow in it. And now I need to discover how that path of becoming a better protector as a dad is. And I needed to kind of journey through that. But I think that was kind of, for me, just as we've been talking, just a way to kind of get at this conversation of how do you grow. Well, one, you notice that you need to grow. Moments kind of arise and saying, hey, I'm short here. I need to deal with that. Or I'm just not going to do that. And so I need to kind of move over here.
Mm-hmm.
Like, for instance, when I was a kid, I wanted to be in the NBA. I
Yeah.
love the game of basketball.
You're taller than I am.
Yeah. I would beat you. I'd get the rebound over you.
You never know.
But you and I are short, right? And I recognized not only was there a lack of skill, but there was a lack of physical prowess.
Mm-hmm.
And so when I turned 16, I recognized that either I choose a different professional sport to go after, or I better choose something else. Because I'm not going to be a basketball player. And, that moment was like, okay, I need to change. So, and again, all these moments, what I keep kind of referring to is these moments that kind of begin to kind of highlight that I need to grow and I need to move forward in a way that has purpose, or that kind of shapes kind of the next stage of life. And quite frankly, I love being there as people work through that. And so that's kind of my wheelhouse, if you will.
Your wheelhouse.
Yeah.
That's from Mickey Mouse, isn't it?
Yeah, the boat, right? That original cartoon. So.
Well, that's great. Today I was thinking, there's a movie that I watched a long time ago called Clockwise, and I was talking to the guy that I work with, and I said, man, I remember that movie, and I really enjoyed it when I watched it. So I said, I'm going to watch it again. And so after I watched it again, I realized it's not as good as I thought it was. You know what I mean? And
That's funny.
the idea that came to mind about that, which I could pose in form of a question to you, is the idea was that the movie hadn't changed. The movie was still the same. But so in other words, the story hadn't changed.
Yeah.
but I changed.
It's a good point.
So I was wondering, in your life, when you look at your life and look back and think of what comes to mind in your life when you think about that? That you do change, you do grow, like you said, we all grow. Where's an instance where there was a story that you look back with nostalgia or whatever, and so you wanted to revisit it. But then it was better, after you revisited, you realized it was actually better just to keep it,
To yourself.
just to romanticize about it.
Well, so I'll go back to where we began, and that was our trip to Nova Scotia. And so there were spots along the coast that Mary and I just fell in love with. One place was called Halls Harbor. A beautiful place, loved it. And it was such a beautiful place in my mind and in Mary's mind. We had spent some beautiful moments there. And when we drove into Halls Harbor with an RV and 4 of our kids, it became very small and not as quaint as in our memory. And our kids are going around going, "This is it? This is this is Halls Harbor? Okay." And so it lost something, right? Just like the movie. And so I can totally relate to that.
It's still the same place.
It's still the
Probably
same
hasn't
place.
changed that much.
And the residents probably have not changed either. Knowing Nova Scotia.
But that's part of growing, though. We're
Yeah.
talking about growing. Part of growing is you change, and a lot of things around you may not change. That you look back and. But then again, there's a lot of things around you that are changing a lot, and you're not changing fast enough.
Yeah. No, I would agree with that. That's a good point. And I think in that, the tension between those two, that's where we can have a little bit of angst, right? I'm not moving fast enough, or I don't know enough, and so we get a little anxious about it. And to find that peace, even in the midst of that, can be difficult.
Well, I'll give you a little. Speaking of, tie this up a little bit with that. You can find the joy in that change. I'll give you a little example that has actually to do with Adelaide.
Okay.
Very small situation. Because I remember Adelaide back when she was a little one. I remember her face. So she has this face, that it's Adelaide. Well, just about a week ago, I was going into Koopmans, leaving Koopmans. I'm driving out and I see the same face, but I see it driving a truck. It's the same face, and she still retained that face. I mean, it was grown, it's more adult, but it was Adelaide, and I thought, look at that face. That's her. That's the little kid. Back then, I could still see that big smile.
Yeah.
And she looks at me, and I go, "Hey," and she goes, "Hey," and then we just, she passes by, I passes by. So it was a moment of joy in change. There was sudden change because when you think about it, that's not little Adelaide anymore.
Nope. No.
And I'm not who I was back then either. I have changed.
Yeah. That's a good point. I like that.
We can find a joy in those things. As a matter of fact, I think there's probably more joy than sadness in that.
Yeah. Good. Love it. It's good stuff.
What else have we been up to these days, anyway? How's the family? How are the kids?
The family is good.
Andrew is
Yeah.
working. Or something?
Andrew is, he lives in Michigan, just north of Detroit. Just got engaged, so
Oh, wow.
it's a whole new experience for Mary and I. We'll see how we navigate bringing in a beautiful lady. She's a wonderful young lady, Eleanor Gamble. Gotta love that name.
Nice.
So it'll be beautiful to get to know her
When
more.
are they hoping to get married?
Yeah, isn't that kind of an interesting question?
They're engaged.
They're engaged, and
Yeah.
it just seems like they get engaged, and so now they're just kind of wondering. You know what? It's interesting. the thing that determines the date of weddings
Yeah.
is the venue, when they can get the venue.
When they can get the venue.
So they're looking at some venues. And so,
Okay, so it's going to happen.
yeah, it'll happen.
It's going to happen.
Probably not this year, but next year. They like the fall, so it sounds like it might be a fall wedding.
Okay.
Fall wedding in Michigan.
Okay. How about Adelaide? She got a driver's license, I assume?
Oh yeah.
Because she was driving
So
that big
Adelaide
truck.
is
So.
20 now. Yeah, so she's a just finished her sophomore year from Calvin College, civil engineering.
Oh, okay.
And today's kind of an auspicious day for her. She started an internship.
That's great.
Yeah.
Wow.
At Consigli Construction.
Consigli,
Yeah.
yeah. Oh, I heard of them, yeah.
Yeah. And so
That's
they're
great.
Yeah. So yeah, very excited.
Wow. And just finished a freshman year.
Sophomore. Just finished her sophomore
Sophomore.
year.
Okay, okay.
Yep.
Yeah.
So,
That's really good.
yeah. Jesse is he's graduated from school. He's a marine biologist. Works in Gloucester. Lives in Somerville.
Marine biologist.
Marine biologist. He's counting fish right now. So
I think you told me about that one time. The
Yeah.
place where they feed the fish into these tanks or whatever. Was it fishery? Or?
fishery. No, he was looking for. That was a hatchery. He was looking for a
Hatchery.
job at a hatchery.
Oh.
He's not doing that right now. He's primarily the ocean fishing. So they deal with the fishermen who are coming off the boats that are out in the ocean.
Marine biologist.
Marine biologist.
Be like George Costanza.
Yeah. Do we have a marine biologist? Oh, that is hilarious.
Oh, you know that one. That's good.
Yeah.
What about Sam? Sam is a farmer in this thing? Quite a
Sam?
farmer?
Yeah, Sam is very deeply involved in 4-H, which has been extremely good for him. Sam has 3 cows right now. He's going to graduate from Whitensville Christian, so he'll do that in a couple weeks, and then go to Hope College, which is in Holland, Michigan.
What's he going to do with the cows when he goes to college?
Well, he'll sell them. He'll sell them this fall, and then they'll be processed for meat.
Does he? Ooh.
Yeah. Sorry, can we say that?
Process for meat is a nice way of saying it.
Yeah.
I do love steak myself anyway. So.
Amen.
Thank you, Sam.
Yep.
All right.
So that's the family. So thank you for asking.
Oh,
Appreciate it.
and in your life right now, you are kind of exploring a couple of different paths. Then.
Yeah. So doing the pastorship and loving it. The river is a good place, but at the same time, I'm also working at the architectural firm. And
What's the best part that you loved about pastoring people?
I think one is praying with people. You have an opportunity. As a pastor, you kind of looked at, oh, here's the guy who will pray. So if you
Yeah.
have a meal, hey, could you pray?
Yeah.
So I end up praying, but it's something of a joy for me to be praying for people. Even on the way over here, a young gentleman called and just struggling with his mother's health and just needed someone to kind of speak into his life, and so just to spend 5 minutes praying with him. It's an opportunity to kind of connect the spiritual and the earthly. What I like to say that prayer is an opportunity to bring heaven down on earth, and so that's what I enjoy immensely. Enjoy to do immensely. So.
Well, let's say about in your prayer life, which I hope you have one, you're a pastor.
Yeah.
So, what do you find that stands out significantly when you come and come in the presence of God to pray? Your own personal life.
Yeah.
What is that thing that seems to come up all the time? Doesn't have to be bad.
No, exactly. So, for me, there's a couple moments in the scriptures that are just prayerful moments. One is when Jesus teaches the disciples to pray. I find great comfort and routine guidance in the Lord's Prayer. that this is an opportunity that Jesus kind of said, here, use this to guide you. Here's how we are to approach. And I find great rest in that as a tool to be praying. And so the Lord's Prayer is very close. The other thing that is very encouraging for me in my own personal prayer life is to reflect and celebrate the answered prayers that we have an opportunity to see. And one of the things about the river is that we pray a lot, which gives us opportunity also to see God's hand in it, and to see celebration, and to see answers, and to see God intertwine with us in our life. And when I'm praying, I remind myself of that God is real, God is comfort, God is present, God is a listener, God is totally engaged. Even when I fall asleep in my prayers, God is present. So that's a significant part of my prayer. And having people's names. Whenever we're asked to pray, we need to put a name to it. And so sometimes when I'm praying, I'm just saying names. Recognizing that some I'm not quite sure what's going on totally, but someone in our community was concerned for Cheryl, was concerned for Pam, was concerned for these people. And so it's a privilege to be able to say, okay, Lord, lean your heart towards this person in their moment of need, concern, or even celebration, and rejoice. We had a young lady who was diagnosed with bladder cancer. And as I understand it, bladder cancer can go really bad quickly. And so we prayed and prayed earnestly for her. A month later, she was back in church with a report that her doctor said that it is shrinking. And the doctor's never seen that. And in her heart, in her sense, there was a deep connection to what was going on in her body and what was happening in the community of faith. And to see that connection was huge for our community, to celebrate with her. It was a great faith moment for her to be encouraged. But it was a reminder that God is present. God, in moments, does bring healing and encouragement. I wish it was 100%. I yearn for that, and I know that there will be a day when it is 100% gone. But in the time being, we'll wait and suffer through until God has done what God is going to do, as he brings everyone that he wants to know him.
100% meaning that God answers every prayer the way we want, or that he...
Well, I believe that when the second coming and heaven is restored...
No, right now, I mean.
Right now?
Yeah.
Oh, I wish it was 100%.
Like every time you ask for a prayer for something, that it just happens.
In particular, healing.
Healing, okay, yeah.
And if it was for me 100%, yes, I would enjoy that. But I recognize too that I ask out of selfishness at times. So when I was a kid, I prayed for a Ferrari.
A Ferrari?
A Ferrari.
You could have prayed for a Mercedes or something.
Well, for you it was Mercedes. For me it was Ferrari.
Yeah, you didn't get it?
Well, my mother bought me, those old dinky toys, the really small little match cars.
Yeah, a Ferrari.
A Ferrari.
There
she
you go.
bought it and she said, "Here it is, your answers to prayer. Now stop
The
praying
answer to
for
prayer.
it."
I heard a show one time that they had a contest, and they said, if you win, we will give you a new Toyota. So somebody won, and then they sent them a little toy of Yoda. It's a toy Yoda.
A toy Yoda. That is rich. Well, that was what my mother was probably thinking.
Yeah.
And so she said, "Here's your Ferrari. Stop praying for a Ferrari."
All right. So what's next for Bruce Dykstra before we wrap it up?
Well, graduation for Samuel. It is a season of marriages. So I'm doing a couple and I'm attending a couple. So I'm looking forward to that. I love people getting married. So it's a good
Good.
moment.
The food is good. It's all.
The food is good.
Yeah.
The dancing,
I like-
everything.
I like that
There's
part.
just a lot of good moments.
But that's the reception more like.
Yeah, but it's all part of it, right?
Let me ask you a question that you probably know that I was gonna. That was one of the questions. Was one of the last questions. If the Ark was leaving, what would you take with you?
If the ark was leaving and I was going into it, I would first of all I'd be thinking about the people that I want to take in.
Yeah.
So definitely I want to be who can I take in with people, and then very selfishly I'd want a basketball and a basketball court.
In the Ark.
Yeah, yeah.
There might be space.
Yeah, there might be
It's a
space.
big one.
So, good food, good wine, and good people. That's what I would want.
Well, you can have that here. You don't have to wait for the Ark to.
That's true, but
Yeah.
you said if you were going to bring it into the ark, I want to make sure I have that stuff.
So you're a simple man.
Yeah, very simple.
So
Now,
that's good.
here's a question for you.
Yeah.
If you were going to go into an ark, what would you take with you?
Oh. Probably my iPad.
Your iPad.
That's one thing, and I will think about the people too. That
Yeah.
I mean, but I try to narrow the question so that just put you on the spot, like just one thing. And but if it was one thing, gee, I don't know,
Why your iPad?
because I got anything I want now. Hopefully, the internet will still be going while the world is getting destroyed.
Yes.
I mean,
Yeah, there you
the
go.
question itself is just
Yeah.
unreal anyway. So. Anyway, well, it's time to wrap it up. Bruce, thank you very much for
Oh,
joining
it's
me.
been a pleasure. Thank you.
It was a pleasure to have you.
Blessings.
Good to see you again.
Yeah, good to see you.
And you can join us next time so we can meet the next person who wants to share their story at People of Interest. And have a good night.